The last video was a little too clean. Like there wasn't really any mind so it's hard to come up with that first clip. So if somebody doesn't mind screwing something up or potentially embarrassing themselves, that would be helpful to me. All right, this is Farm to Markets number 13, and today we were talking about Evergrande, wash sale rules on cryptocurrency, and what to do with the kids when everyone's bored. Evergrande, China's second biggest property developer, may have trouble making its next debt payment due on Thursday. This has driven markets down because investors are afraid this could start a chain reaction of financial troubles across the globe that would echo back to long-term capital management of the 90s. Alex, do you want to give us your thoughts on what's going on here?
Well, to understand what's going on with Evergrande, you kind of have to understand what the Chinese economy has been all about in the last decade plus. This is an economy that works very differently from the United States. 40% of it is dependent on exports. 25% of its GDP, I believe, is exports to the US. I could be getting that wrong, but I think that's what I've read. And another 28% of its GDP is property development. And the way a lot of this goes is they will take money from an investor, build something, and then the investor gets it. That's at least in theory. But most of these countries companies are operating on debt, significant levels of debt, so much debt that there's no real chance they could ever pay it off realistically if everybody started defaulting at once. And Evergrande is one of the big players. They've been calling it a Lehman Brothers moment, potentially anyways, because if it defaults, then a lot of other countries or companies could pretty quickly default, and then the whole country goes into a default crisis. It sounds like that the Chinese government is not simply going to let Evergrande go and allow a potential, contagion risk, default crisis get out of control. That said, China seems to be wanting to really crack down on stuff like this. And so there's no more zero interest loans that the state-backed bank issues to a company like Evergrande that would just let them roll over the debt in perpetuity with no payments forever, which is how it's been operating for a long time now. So now that system is ending, Evergrande, I think, is going to be the first of many to deal with this, and China is going to have to figure out how to manage these big companies with enormous unpayable debts that they no longer have the ability to just borrow forever to repay. I think sorry, I'm going a little long here, but for now, it looks like China's got it under control. Markets seem to agree. We'll see going forward. But I think the China that people knew is over, and what that new China is going to look like might look more like what we're going to see in the next few weeks.
Joe, what do you think?
This story would not even be a blip on our radar screen if we didn't have such a complex, interwoven, global financial system. The market's pretty much sold off on Monday with the Evergrande news that came out last Thursday. And most of that sell-off is because markets tend to be rather pessimistic. And we don't know if our own major financial institutions had any play in Evergrande. It can become as a very, very concerning revelation if it finds out that Goldman Sachs or Bank of America or some of these other large financial institutions have a 5% holding in some of this debt, because FDIC insurance says the government has to come in and secure all of our deposits up to $250,000 or $500,000 for a couple if in fact these banks made bad loans. I suspect that the news has come out that American banks don't have a whole lot of exposure to this, but it's kind of just another example of why we need to treat debt with an incredible amount of care, because it can bring down a whole house of cards when it's abused.
Drew, what do you think?
Yeah, kind of going off of my dad's comment with debt. To paraphrase Warren Buffett, using debt is when the tide goes out and you find out who was skinny dipping. In the event with Evergrande, they've been operating with heavy debt for a long time, and now I guess it's just exposing who was swimming naked. It's not like this happened overnight. Evergrande has been squeezed to make its debt payments and payroll obligations for years. In the past, they've got a few of their debt payments waived. They've even come up with a plan for debt reduction. A big factor in this, now that it's making the news, is China's cracking down on their borrowing limits. So they're basically shutting off the tap for lending for Evergrande. The way I see it, there's two big options. You could do a government bailout that would condone reckless borrowing, and it would continue to support the moral hazard of too big to fail. Two, you could let them fail. This would certainly have negative effects across the financial system, mostly in China. I would like to see them just sell off all of their assets, have a fire sale, and then deal with it with whatever debt is left over. When it comes to investing, if you're a lender to Evergrande, you got to do your due diligence. When researching companies or stocks, one of the first things I look at is debt, and I think it's very important to be averse to it.
I saw in a couple of news websites today that it looks like the Chinese government might acquire Evergrande and then restructure it into 3 companies. They weren't on what I consider particularly reputable ones. There was I think Foreign Exchange Trader had some news on it, but I haven't seen it in like the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, or something like that. But it looks like, kind of to Joe's point, is that they've come up. It looks like for sure they're going to make their debt payment that was due Thursday, which would be the 23rd of September. And so it looks like the market's kind of breathed a sigh of relief about that. And then it looks like, at least at this point, there's some rumor that the Chinese government might come in, kind of bail it out, restructure it into 3 different companies, and then just see if they can't unwind some of that. But like what Alex said, is that I don't know if you can ever pay off the amount of debt that they have, because it's like $350 billion worth of debt or something like that. Mm-hmm. And essentially, they've just been betting on the fact that real estate prices are going to grow faster than the payments that they have to make. And with China's new policy to kind of rein in real estate prices, that had an effect on them, and now they're having to deal with all this debt that Evergrande has acquired. The most interesting fact that everybody points out, or every article I've read, is that Evergrande does have a soccer team, and they're so I'll get that one out of the way. And they're just basically just a huge conglomerate that tries to appease the Chinese government, and that's why they ended up with a soccer team. They also have an electrical vehicle arm, and they got into some other stuff, and basically just got overextended, and now they're having to deal with it.
I don't know how much revenue their soccer team brings to the table, but I think real estate's like 15% of China's whole GDP. So it's a lot.
I heard 28.
28. Okay.
That's what I read the other day, and I should clarify. I pulled up the note that I had. So the actual dollar amount of China's GDP that's exported to the U.S. is about 0.5% to 1%. But all the jobs and everything else financed by that trade, so factories, it's, the employees and their spending amounts to something like 20 to 25% of U.S. GDP. So, I mean, these are big chunks of China's GDP trade is. But yeah, the note that I had was 28% is real estate and property development in China as their GDP. So Evergrande is no small thing when it comes to the Chinese economy.
I'd say the thing that's most alarming to me, gentlemen, is that how global the belief system is that the federal government is going to come in and solve all of your capitalistic problems. That across the board, I'm sure you all saw the same news releases I saw. Everybody's banking on the Chinese government sweeping in and saving the day. That might help out the people who are already invested with Evergrande, but it does absolutely nothing for new investors coming in. Man, they could have come in and bought a lot of assets for pennies on the dollar if governments didn't sweep in and steal these opportunities away from first-time investors.
Yeah, the thing that concerns me is that Evergrande is the second biggest real estate developer in China. And it'd be interesting to see what's going on with the biggest. I can't remember their name. I saw it, and I don't know if I even do a good job pronouncing it. But this is the second biggest real estate developer. It'd be interesting to see what's going on with the first biggest. And then the other concerning thing is how many other companies are so overextended in terms of debt that they would have to be bailed out as well. And where's the breaking point where if all these companies start defaulting on their debt, I would imagine that governments can only go so far in terms of bailing companies out. So hopefully this is somewhat of a wake-up call for companies and governments to start unwinding some of this stuff before it gets out of control.
Evidently, the Chinese are learning from us on how to privatize profits and socialize the costs.
Yeah.
All right. In an effort to raise money to fund a $3.5 trillion infrastructure bill, some members of the House have proposed to toughen regulations on trading cryptocurrencies. Specifically, they want to implement the wash sale rule. We want to implement the wash sale rule, which limits investors' ability to sell assets with the intention of locking in capital losses and then buying those same assets back a short while later, so they can offset their capital gains in the future. Joe, what's your reaction to this?
Well, my first question is cryptocurrency an investment, or is it going to be a form of currency? The whole purpose of cryptocurrency when it first came out several years ago is it was going to be an alternative currency, but in reality, it's been nothing more than a speculative trading instrument. Congress is looking at crypto, and they're just mad that some people have made money and at the same time have been able to avoid taxes by doing some of the tax avoidance of the wash rule. We didn't really explain what that is, and maybe you will, Tom, but if cryptocurrency starts getting treated like a wash rule, the only people who are going to care about that are people who make enough money who can itemize their deductions on their income taxes. Well, after the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that was passed here under the Trump administration, not that many Americans really even itemize on their taxes anymore. So only savvy investors are going to be subject to this wash rule. And as a result, those same savvy investors will just change their behavior in such a way where they just figure out some other way to get around that. So they're not going to raise the $16.8 billion like the House Ways and Means Committee claims. That just is never going to happen. So they're just pie in the sky thinking that they're going to find this money by digging around the seat cushions by coming up with a wash rule to capture extra money to pay for their boondoggle of $3.5 trillion.
Right. And so, yeah, to clarify, a wash sale is basically that, if you own shares of Tesla and let's say Tesla drops by 20%, and you can either do two things, is that you can, in order to trigger a wash sale, let's say Tesla drops 20%, you sell Tesla, you wait a day, and then you buy Tesla back. The thinking is that you can sell Tesla, realize all the capital losses, buy that same stock back, write it up, and then have those losses offset your gains when it's time to sell in the future. The IRS says this is a big no-no, and basically the wash sale rule will add back in your losses so that it comes out as a wash, like the rule says. The confusing thing about the wash sale rule is that they say you can't do this in a 60-day period. And so essentially what that does is, again, if Tesla drops 20%, you could essentially double down on Tesla, so buy more of it, and then like a week later, sell those assets for a small gain, and then sell your original shares for losses, and then buy all those back. And if you do that in a 60-day period, that's a no-no. But essentially, if you're going to ride Tesla down, sell it, you would have to wait 31 days to buy it back before the government would say that's okay. And they're going to try and apply this to cryptocurrency. To me, cryptocurrency is kind of a wild west right now, and there's a lot of low-hanging fruit here for the IRS and the government to come in and start taxing it to raise money for bills. Because there's essentially, stocks and securities have tons of rules and tons of regulations attached to them right now, and crypto's got nothing. So this is essentially low-hanging fruit for the government to come in, fix rules to generate revenue for some of these new bills. But Alex, what do you think?
Well, I don't really see this so much as a revenue thing. I mean, Joe mentioned $16.8 billion over 10 years. I mean, this is a pittance. This is pocket change. This is nothing. To me, this is more of looking to kill crypto by 1,000 cuts. Unlike places like, say, China or India or the EU or, other governments that have heavily regulated it, outright banned it, or are intending to do one of those two things in the near future. I really think the federal government, in particular the Federal Reserve, does not like crypto. They don't want it around. Right now it's an asset, so it's not really a huge problem for them since barely anybody's doing anything resembling a transaction with it. And I think an outright ban would be very unpopular, but I think this is just one more little cut that they're using to try and drive people out of it, making it harder for people to trade it. A lot of people who trade it are day traders who are not in it for long periods of time. So like I said, I think this is just another way to make it a little bit harder each and every year to deal with crypto.
Drew, what do you think?
I agree with Alex's comment about how it's government's way of trying to kill crypto, but with 1,000 cuts. It seems that whenever there's something great out there in the market, the government just wants to throw cold water on it. I think if they impose the wash sale rule, then maybe people will just stop trading crypto as frequently. Bottom line is, I don't think they're going to get their $16.8 billion as they estimate. The other thing is, I don't know how much people are really going to care. I don't know how sensitive the average trader is to wash sale rules. And it seems that crypto is very popular with the average trader. So it's, now that there's a reason to change the rules, they're going to do it. I guess we'll just have to see what happens.
A couple points is that one, cryptocurrency, supposedly no cryptocurrency is substantially similar to the other. So if you buy Bitcoin and then you sell it, you can buy Ethereum, and supposedly they're completely different from each other, for various reasons. It's the same thing if you sell Bitcoin and then you buy it's not an ETF, but it's kind of like it's like a trust, like the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. There's other trusts like it that have half Bitcoin, half Ethereum, and that's essentially considered not similar enough to Bitcoin to count against the wash sale rule. So it sounds like there's also probably some ways where you can sell your Bitcoin position and then buy something that's going to perform similarly, but isn't necessarily a similar asset. So there might be a way of getting around that. Also, I'll point out when you're trying to pass a $3.5 trillion bill on top of trillions of dollars of spending that you already have done, this is basically essentially like looking under the couch cushions when you're putting together your budget. You're going to wring every cent out of whatever category you can to come up with the money to pay these huge bills. But
I would like to add, if you are an investor that holds a lot of cryptocurrency and you're operating at a loss right now, crypto's down, it may be a good time to claim some of those losses before this rule may be imposed by December 31st. I'm not giving any tax advice right now, but if it does go through, then the end of the year, the rule will go into place.
You also want to be mindful of the economic substance rule, whereas that if you sell something, there has to be some economic substance behind the sale. So, if you sell it and then buy it back 2 seconds later, the IRS you're going to have a hard time explaining to the IRS that this had some economic substance behind it. So, I've heard conservatively, you may at least want to wait a day. Just so you can say, hey, news came out today, it spooked me, I sold it. Reports came out a day later that said this wasn't true or something like that, and then you might have a little bit easier time arguing economic substance. But that would be one thing to be mindful of if you're going to execute this maneuver.
We'll talk about the headache created to the individual who treats cryptocurrency like it's a currency. because you get your paycheck from the office and you put it in your cryptocurrency account, and you turn around and pay your mortgage from your cryptocurrency account. You just made a buy and a sell, and you weren't even thinking about taxes. All you were thinking we were doing was depositing your paycheck and paying your mortgage.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm El Salvador, I'm probably sweating bullets right now. All right, Drew, I'll paint a picture for you here. It's February. It's the middle of February. The winter carnival is over. It's gray outside. The weather is horrible. Ellie's been inside for a couple of weeks now because the weather's so bad. There's nothing going on. She's getting fuzzy. Everybody's bored and cranky. As a parent, what's your game plan? Like, what do you do in this situation?
I think the only the difference in your scenario and my reality is I don't let Ellie stay inside.
Okay.
We try to get outdoors as much as possible. Last winter we did a lot of sledding, just pulling her around in the sled. There's goats, in my backyard, so we like to play with the animals. I think I have some pictures of her actually riding goats, but trying to get outside as much as possible is certainly my strategy.
Alex, what do you do?
Well, I guess depending on how horrible the weather is, last year and this year again, we're probably going to try and take her out snowshoeing. We have a hiking backpack for Alma, and we take her out to Heron Park or Lone Pine in the spring, summer, and fall. And this past winter we did that too. It's as long as it's not too ridiculously cold, or it's not freezing rain or anything, just throw her in the bag and she's marching along with us. Otherwise, our intention is to do what my parents did, which is probably take her over to McDonald's and let her play in the ball pit for a little while. We'll see how that goes. But this past winter, I don't think it was even open. So.
And Joe, when Drew was getting fussy, what'd you used to do?
Drew learned not to get fussy because I'd put him in his snowsuit and take him outside. I have one of those rare abilities. I can put up with my children's discomfort way better than their mother can. So any wailing and gnashing of teeth that the children, would respond with, it didn't bother me. So they would usually get tired of crying much earlier than I would get tired of making them endure the elements.
I have two go-to things. One is that when you're stuck inside, we need somewhere to go. We always go. There's the Marriott that's by the airport right now, and as if you go drive into the parking lot, and you park on the far left side. You're pretty close to the runway, and so you can watch the planes either take off or land, I guess, depending on which way the wind is going. Griffin will wet his diaper if he sees an airplane, and my daughter, who's about 7, she likes it enough that we're out doing something, and she thinks they're moderately cool, so she likes it too. So if we're ever in a situation where there's not much to do, we can always go go to the airport and watch the planes. It's particularly entertaining when the weather is bad. You're trying to watch a pilot land a plane in a blizzard. Adds a certain level of excitement to the day. And then kind of like you guys, is that we'll take the kids to Lone Pine, and there's some trails there, and there's a lot of people around, so I don't think you have to worry about predators too much. But that's our other thing when the weather is a little bit decent, is we go to Lone Pine, walk around the trails.
Yeah,
I think you have to embrace the Montana weather. When it comes down to it. I didn't move to Las Vegas to avoid the heat. Certainly not going to live in Montana to avoid the cold. We're here, and that's what you get.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I should also note that one thing we're going to try this year is, so there's 2 good sledding hills in Kalispell, at least that we know of. Heron Park has one of them. You just hike a little ways to the back end of where the horse training center is, and there's a big hill back there that you can pretty easily hike up and slide down. It's pretty good distance. The other one is Lawrence Park in Kalispell. There's a pretty good hill that people sled on. Alma was too young for that last year. We tried it once at Heron and she was not having it. So this year we're going to try and do some of that.
I don't even know if it's possible now that the flathead has been discovered, but when my kids were little in the wintertime, I used to get a 1-month pool pass at one of the hotels or one of the motels. And I don't remember ever having to compete. And basically for a month, I'd have swim lessons with the kids. And I would teach them to swim for the whole month of, say, January or February.
That's a good idea.
I called a few hotels and they weren't doing that anymore because I remember, my parents used to go swim at one and it was like $5 to like do it or something like that. But I called a couple and I don't think they do it anymore, but that's a good idea.
Mm.
All right, well, that's it for number 13. Again, appreciate all the comments and the people being kind of interacting with us. It's been nice, and we'll see you next week.
All right, see you.